Hey everyone, welcome back to the Watson Blocks podcast. This show is brought to you by Giga Energy, a leading electrical manufacturer focused on Bitcoin mining. And before we get too far into the intro today, I wanted to quickly ask for a big favor. If you guys have not subscribed to the show or given us a rating and review, if you could take a second and go down and do that right now, that would be hugely helpful. Also, make sure that you go check out the new YouTube channel that we just launched. You can now watch all of these conversations, as well as see some of the new content that we're going to be releasing soon. This week on the show, I had the pleasure of sitting down with Tom Mapes, the founder and president of the Digital Energy Council. And my gosh, did we have an incredible conversation. All I can say is that you guys really need to listen to the whole episode because there is so much information packed into this conversation, and it's all geared towards helping the industry from a legislative perspective. We talk all things power and mining that's going on at Capitol Hill, and Tom goes over topics such as why politicians quickly and easily dismiss the Christmas lights argument, and we get into, are there any bills that are keeping Tom up at night? Like I said, I would encourage you to listen to the whole episode. Tom is doing some phenomenal work on behalf of the Bitcoin mining industry and tackling policy from the energy side, which you guys know I'm all about that. And so with that, I hope that you enjoy today's discussion with Tom Mapes. This show is brought to you by Foreman, the leading miner management software, where you can also manage and automate your curtailment strategy all from one clean dashboard. Whether you have 3 miners or 30,000 miners and a robust, complicated curtailment strategy in a regulated power market, you can manage all of that leveraging Foreman. Guys, I honestly don't think I'm doing this software justice just by talking about it. You really need to go give this a try for yourselves just to understand how easy it is to start and quickly find multiple miners all at once, configure them all at once, and then set up your automated prompts for ramp up and ramp down for the particular curtailment strategy that you have. Seriously, if I can do this, which I have, and I still use to this day, then all of you certainly can do this too. Go check them out and get started managing your miners like a pro today at foreman.mn. That's FOREMAN.MN, foreman.mn. Today's podcast is brought to you by our sponsor, the Texas Blockchain Council, a Bitcoin-first nonprofit industry organization working to make Texas the jurisdiction of choice for Bitcoin mining and blockchain innovation. For more information, please visit their website at texasblockchaincouncil.org. Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. Like I said in the introduction, I have the pleasure of sitting down with Tom Mapes, the president and founder of the Digital Energy Council. Tom, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Ben.
I am really excited to get into this, Tom. I said it right before we hit play here, or record rather. I know very little about the world of policy and law and just kind of how everything gets worked through the world that you live in. So I'm super pumped to get into this today. I'm glad that we could find some time.
No, and thanks for having me. And you're not alone on that. I bet you, if you went and polled most of your friends, family, whoever you know out there, basic civics is not people's strong point. Most think if you watch the news these days, everyone thinks they know everything about what's going on around the policy world, but it's a little more complicated than that.
Well, and that's it's a good teaser to leave. We'll come back to that. So it's what I would love, Tom, and I'll give you some context for why. You know, my audience is probably sick of me always asking every guest to start the episode with your background. But what I like about hearing your background is I think it lends to credibility of your experience, you know, what you've been doing in your professional life that's kind of led you up to this point in time. So could you please give us a walkthrough of your background and then touch on how that got you into the crazy world of Bitcoin mining, and what you're doing today?
Yeah. I think I do have a little interesting way I got into this space. I think it's one of the more unusual ones here. So background on myself, originally from the East Coast, went to college out west, University of Colorado. Found my way, started working in the campaign world out west, up in Alaska and Colorado. Got into politics, got into became interested in this world. Found my way to Capitol Hill, where I worked for um, when she was a House member, now Senator Lummis, who's become a champion of the industry.
Oh, yeah.
She was one of my first jobs in Congress, and then made my way over to Senator Murkowski when she was chair of the Energy Committee. After I left Senator Murkowski's office, I worked at the Department of Energy for a few years, and that's frankly when I started really kind of realizing that this is ultimately an energy play, is how I foresee this whole ecosystem of digital asset mining and digital energy and Bitcoin and all that stuff. Um, so so the background's in energy policy. That's what I'm spent my large chunk of my professional life in. As I was transitioning out of the Department of Energy, I was looking into traditional energy roles within the public policy sphere. Whether that be going back to Capitol Hill, whether that be getting in with the lobbying group around town, energy lobbying or government affairs, etc. But the more and more I just kept hearing about this Bitcoin mining thing, and the more and more I read into it, it kind of just clicked that, as mentioned, this is ultimately an energy opportunity. It's energy infrastructure, it's grid build out, it's alternative financing for these energy products or
Yep.
projects. There's a lot of, and that's just the tip of the iceberg on some of this stuff. And there was a lot of energy pieces to this, and there had been other associations, rightfully so, focused on kind of the financial side of things, dealing with the SEC, CFTC, pieces like that. And no one was talking about the energy piece really. So kind of started digging in a bit, pitched the idea, and started led the first ever focused policy mining group here in DC with another association. And then uh, August of this year went live with the Digital Energy Council. So it's kind of the Cliff Notes version of how we got here.
Sure. And I appreciate that. So I bring you back to like the Department of Energy and your time there. Were you guys hearing about Bitcoin mining from the standpoint of like large load, large flexible load, tool for the grid, or maybe were you interacting with it in any way or had heard about it in that time?
Not necessarily this mining piece yet. China still had the large chunk of it at this point.
Yep.
It was starting. You'd hear bits and pieces here and there. The real overlap was in, I think it was 2019. It might have been 2020. They stood up the AI office over at the Department of Energy, and
Oh,
the
interesting.
formal name the formal name is the Office of Artificial Intelligence or something.
Some
I'd have
big
to go.
long acronym, I'm sure.
Yeah. But ultimately, the main focus was, they said, this is getting larger and larger. This is going to use a lot of power, et cetera, a lot of generation piece. And they stood that up. I didn't work directly in that office, but it's kind of where you'd hear this kicked around a bit, particularly the overlap there with the data center piece and AI mining, et cetera. So um, there was some talk, but it frankly wasn't where kind of it is now, I guess you could say.
Sure. What I find so interesting about it is you hear things like that. So it's like this is, a few years ago, several years ago, they spun up a whole department for artificial intelligence where I'm sure, you know, digital assets, Bitcoin was a part of that fold. But there seems to be like this disconnect, and I'm kind of leapfrogging into the conversation here. There's like this disconnect between that department. People know about it. Like they know it's there. They know it's coming. They know it uses a lot of energy, even though it's AI, then it was AI, but like now Bitcoin mining's here. It's 5% of the ERCOT grid. Like it's here. But there still seems to be like this disconnect. Do you know why? Like, what's the disconnect?
Um, frankly, that's kind of why I felt it was a need to stand up the Digital Energy Council. You know, kind of backtracking a little bit.
Hmm.
I mentioned all these other associations, and you know all the names out there. There's a lot of people doing a lot of good work in our space. Um, but I thought we needed our own fully focused discussion and education piece, and representing the industry. For a long time, mining got lost. The mining and energy piece got lost in the dialogue between all these groups. One day they're in Congress talking, or Department of Energy, whoever it might be, talking with someone in the office, and they have to talk about SEC taxation and are we a commodity? Are we security? What are all these financial discussions, which are needed, which is
Yeah.
very good that it's happening. What's good for all the ecosystem as a whole. Um, but this mining piece just kept getting lost in the shuffle there. And to your question of they know it was coming, why aren't we there? I think it's that getting these agencies, getting policymakers, et cetera, comfortable with the idea of what we're doing. Um, I think, to be frank, at times there's a lot of great stories the industry has out there.
Hmm.
I think at
Yeah.
certain times the industry might have come in a little fast and strong in some of these areas. I've had conversations with, whether it be uh, government agencies or utility companies, where they like to say, you know, your industry likes telling us how to do our job, and tell us about, the energy industry that we've been working on for a lot longer than you guys have
Oh,
been around.
yeah.
So
Yep.
I think there is a piece of, we need to really sit down, frame this as an energy conversation, energy dialogue. We need people who really understand how the energy ecosystem works, power production, upstream, downstream, all the way, or, you know, every piece of it, generation, distribution, like I said, just kind of know energy, know how the energy world works. We are energy companies,
Yeah.
is what I like to tell our members. We're energy companies, and the byproduct just happens to be Bitcoin. But we're energy infrastructure at the end of the day.
Yeah. It's I it's almost like a thank you for calling it out type of a moment, where it's what I find a lot of is it's the you know, people that have never spent any time in the energy industry, uh, masquerading as if they are the expert in it. So it's you know, I think we're moving away from that. I think you're starting to see a lot of actual energy experts come into the scene. It's the one that comes to mind the most for me, which is Eric Neal with Digital
Mm-hmm.
Power Optimization, and he shared his story on a previous episode where he was sitting at the table with a utility company on their side, listening to a mining company, and he had one meeting with the mining company, and he jumped to the other side of the table because he immediately sees and saw the benefit. Yeah, that's
And I like Eric, and I like those guys a lot. And frankly, Eric knows more about the utility industry than myself. And sometimes you gotta know when someone knows more about utility than you do. I used to sit with, when I was at the Department of Energy, the secretary at the time. Um, you know, I always gave him credit. He could be a bit of a polarizing figure in the political scene, so that's why I was going to say the secretary at the time. But he was smart enough. When he didn't know something, he would turn and say, "This person's the expert of however long," and I think our industry at times could use um, a little of that, and say, "We don't know, but we're only becoming more hand in glove with the energy ecosystem, and let's all learn this together, and kind of have these conversations, good, bad, or indifferent."
yeah. There's a lot of that already happening. I'm very excited about all of that because it's happening faster and faster. So Tom, I don't want to glaze over this and blow past it. I'd love for you, like, give us the who's who of Digital Energy Council. What is the organization? What are you working on, and how are you doing it? Maybe most importantly.
So, as I mentioned, we launched live in August, and our main focus is that nexus of energy and digital assets. So, pretty much Bitcoin miners. Let's put it that
Yeah.
way. Um, But we are, as mentioned, is fully focused on that energy piece. We are there as an educational tool, trying to push public policy in support of the industry. And I should have mentioned earlier, part of the reason, standing up the Digital Energy Council, and I'm sure you've had this conversation on other podcasts. Um, Energy is one of the most regulated industries in the world, and as I said, we're an energy group, so we need to start thinking like that and putting together these support mechanisms like the Digital Energy Council to have a voice at the table when these energy policies are being built out and written, and being the industry voice to tell that story and tell the highlights that we have to offer, particularly as a distributed energy resource, the demand response aspect, pieces like that. But ultimately, I'm here to work with key stakeholders, build out coalitions of support, and drive policy on behalf of our industry. And among other things, is obviously we have traditional Bitcoin miners involved, but also to bridge that gap with traditional energy companies is a goal we have, to get them more and more engaged and get them to be voices of support moving forward. I think that's going to be a little bit of a lift, but right now
A lot of a lift, yes.
a lot of a lift, exactly. And right
Yeah.
now, but it is, we need to start having those conversations. And ways we're doing that around here is working with the traditional energy associations around DC. A lot of them have a lot of clout and a lot of voice here in town. So building relationships over there. Come 2024, we're going to be holding some energy roundtables and discussions with them. And as mentioned, bringing this information up to Capitol Hill and other key stakeholders. There's a lot of good stories to tell. We need to tell them. And there's a lot of data points, a lot of all that. A lot of groups doing a lot of good work, but if someone doesn't carry them up to the hill or tell that story on behalf of the industry, what good does it do? So
Yeah. What comes to mind for me, Tom, is your approach is very top down, right? So you're kind of this is more of a question, and I'd love for you to touch on this more. Is you looked at all of this, identified what you just laid out, and said, I need to start at Capitol Hill and work down, right? Is that kind of the approach that you're?
it's so one thing about the Digital Energy Council is we are fully federally focused right now. And there's other groups doing good works in the states right now. Our main focus is at the federal piece. So obviously Capitol Hill and the agencies around here, the administration, the White House, Department of Energy, EPA,
Mm-hmm.
FERC,
Yep.
along with all key stakeholders within Congress, particularly House Energy and Commerce, Senate EPW. They had the hearing earlier this year on mining. House Energy and Commerce last year had a hearing on mining, and then Senate Energy and Natural Resources. So those are kind of some of the real focus areas that we're working on here. Yes, I mean, short answer, yes to what you're saying, but um, it's building relationships with those key
Yeah,
decision
and
makers.
and that's all of that is in design to make the biggest and have the biggest effect possible for both industries, energy and Bitcoin mining. Correct? These questions, Tom, these are coming again.
No, 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 no,
This is
no.
such a
I,
lack of
I
understanding on
like it.
my part. So,
I
so
like it.
yeah,
No, I'm sure in some of the other conversations you've had, a lot of the energy piece really, local and state play a huge role in the average day to day buying and selling of power, energy systems, etc. But at the end of the day, those micro kind of
efforts.
smaller, yeah,
Yeah.
micro efforts, ultimately everything kind of funnels up to the federal level. And at some points, they will, as mentioned, energy and the regulation piece. It's just good, bad, or indifferent. It is what energy is,
Yep.
at the end of the day. And it will be regulated in some capacity. And you can't just show up at the 11th hour and say, "Oh yeah, we're here to add this to the bill." You have to build these relationships out months, if not years, in advance, and get get, interested parties read up on what we are doing, get them comfortable with what we are doing, and maybe at times have hard conversations of how we could do it better, or where we are failing, or as mentioned, great stories we have to tell, things like that. So you're kind of working out, kind of a long runway here at sorts. And at some capacity, there will be mining, however it's framed within some of this legislation, whether it be they reference it directly or they call out some sort of, they sometimes they like to, within some of these pieces of legislation, really not hide, but they frame, instead of saying Bitcoin mining, they'll say demand response piece or something. There'll be some way they
Large
do it. And
flexible
yeah,
load.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. Um,
ERCOT, and this is not for any nefarious reason other than they don't want to pigeonhole or
mhm.
label a segment on their grid. They call all of the Bitcoin mining under the large flexible load like bucket. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. And at some point, there will be federal pieces of legislation that will have that baked in. And if we are not there representing our industry, they'll write it without us. And you know, uh, we were talking about the AI and traditional data centers a bit earlier, and I think there's a real conversation coming up that some are starting to talk about, but we only have so much generation at the moment, and there might be some um, hard conversations that we
Yeah.
might, you know, that's my way of saying it lightly, but we need to be there representing our industry when those conversations get had.
Yes. I have found it interesting watching the whole AI kind of bust onto the scene the way that it, I think really just this last year, in 2023, I feel like it's really busted onto the scene in a big way. Maybe shed a little bit of light on just how much energy is going to get used in that sector. It's been interesting to watch that sector not get hammered on their energy use or the energy mix that supplies them their energy, while our industry gets just clobbered and beaten over the head with it.
Well, this might sound like me giving a pitch for the Digital Energy Council and the work we do here in DC, but you know who all these data centers are. They have deep pockets and a lot of voices up here and a lot of representation up here.
Oh,
And
okay. Yeah.
so got the Googles, the Amazons. There's
Microsoft. Yeah. Yes.
Microsoft.
Yeah.
You name some of the large players in that ecosystem, or in this ecosystem, and um, they're up there. They've been doing this for a long time, and we're still relatively new to this. This whole equation, to say. So there's a lot of that, and a lot of, I think, our industry as a whole, and myself included, we need to do a better job explaining the utility of what we have to offer. Because you go into these
Oh, yeah.
offices, and their knowledge level is tiny. A lot of folks within our industry, I think we lose sight of the fact that we work in this day to day, this just even basic dialogue, hash rate, mining, ASICs, you name some sort of term, we hear it every day. We know what it
Yeah.
is.
Yeah. Yep.
You go talk to some staff around Capitol Hill. They don't know what that is. So it's you know, uh, where was I going? I was
The just the correlation between why
oh, the
AI.
utility of
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
Yes, the
Yep.
utility of this. I mean, it's they kind of have more of a tangible read on what AI is. You have ChatGPT and things like that. Whether they like it or not, that's not it's not the concern, but they at least can grasp that. And I think we need to do a good job, a better job of explaining the utility of why we are here, and how we could make everyone's lives better, easier, however you want to frame it.
Yeah.
I once was in a meeting with the chair of the CFTC and with another miner, and they start giving the old spiel, the talking points of, well, Christmas lights use more energy than mining. And the chair of the CFTC stops him in his track and says, but I could see Christmas lights. They make me happy. What do you guys do? And I think having, being able to explain that utility of, and we can,
Okay.
and people can, but I think more kind of day to day, kind of almost, I don't want to say dumbing it down, but maybe boiling it down to explain some of that, I think can go a long way.
Interesting.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does. And I really love that example because that alone sheds a lot of light on like what's going on in terms of like what impact the conversations are having. So again, he can see the Christmas lights, right? And so, not suggesting that we're going to get every single person, in Capitol Hill to go tour a mining facility, but it could almost be repositioned then as like true tool in the tool belt for a utility company
Precisely.
angle instead of trying to throw mud at Christmas lights or throw mud at hair dryers or, whatever large, user of electricity you want to draw an example to. So it's fascinating. That's a great example.
Prime example of getting members down to sites. Got Congressman Rick Allen down to Clean Sparks in Washington, Georgia. We got him down to their site earlier this year. No disrespect to Congressman Allen, but he's an older congressman who, frankly, isn't going to get the technology or the tech piece to Bitcoin, and that's not a knock on him at all. That's my mother. My mother's not going to get the technology. It's just a different generation. It's a newer thing. It takes some time. We got him to the site, and he was kind of, he was like, oh, we explained to him what it was, and he kind of had that takeaway of, oh, you guys are just kind of a tool, paying taxes in the region, working with the local municipalities, building out this energy infrastructure. I don't know what Bitcoin is, but I can get behind that, and that's a real prime example of what miners really can bring to the table here.
Oh yeah, lift the tax base, employ locals, come in and backfill old industry that may have left for whatever reason. I mean, it's so much more impactful to get people boots on the ground, go touch and feel this thing, and then understand it from like the economical impact in a community plus the utility for a utility company. It's that's awesome. I love it.
Like you said, you said the key thing here, tool in the toolbox is what we have to offer here. It's we're not some silver bullet overnight that's going to change the energy industry. These big utilities, the Dukes of the world, the Southern companies of the world, the you name, those are just some of the big boys off the top of my head. They're not going to become Bitcoin miners overnight or even be publicly supportive. But if we show them that we could be a tool within this, energy build out and energy ecosystem, particularly as the current administration's focus is bringing more renewables on the grid, you have right now, you have batteries, to stabilize it. You have batteries that still, frankly, who knows if we're quite there yet on that. Peaker plants, which could be good, right or wrong, or generally running off some sort of coal or oil
natural gas, coal, yep.
And then mining. So we're like to that main point. We're a tool within this toolbox here, and that goes back to how I believe we need to frame this in a public policy space.
And now a quick word from our sponsor. This show is powered by Giga Energy. Giga Energy is a vertically integrated Bitcoin mining company that manufactures all of the electrical infrastructure needed to start mining Bitcoin. Whether that's medium voltage switchgear, PDUs, or power cables for your miners, the team at Giga Energy has you covered. Reach out to their sales team today for all of your electrical infrastructure needs at sales@gigaenergy.com. Use the word hashrate for the subject of the email, and you'll get 5% off your order. All right, now back to the show.
Oh, yeah. I mean, without a doubt. And it kind of brings me back to what you were saying about, Google, Amazon, Microsoft. These guys have been up playing at this level for a long time. What do you think their maneuver is around data centers? I mean, my God, these things, I think in aggregation, use more electricity than Bitcoin mining. Audience, somebody fact check me on that. But I think I think the data center industry, at least their roadmap, when you go check the public ones, is like a gigawatt per year in expansion. You don't see miners touting that as a roadmap forward. So what do you have some insight into like what they're doing? How are they able to, I don't know if it's people have blinders to data centers or what, but they don't even curtail.
No, that's what I was about to say. That's the key piece there is what we are able to offer there. And, as I said, I think it's these tangible things people can grasp. I don't have any sort of, I haven't been in the room with Google or Amazon's or anything like that, Microsoft's. But I'm sure they go in and say, I have a whole business running on this 24/7. I have, we have the Amazon website that needs to run. We have a hospital backup on this. Things can't shut down, so we need this power. And these, they're established. They're all established companies, established industries that policymakers and decision makers feel comfortable with and know. They've had a long time to see their fruits of their labor over time. So some more positive than others, I think. Just like anything, there's positives and negatives, but I think it just kind of goes to that tangible comfort with these industries, and money doesn't hurt in politics. Let's call a spade a spade.
Yeah. Well, and so again, I'm showing my just complete and utter lack of understanding of it all. They have lobbyists and lobbyist groups, right? Is that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay.
So if you want to get into that a little bit, so these large companies have whole lobby teams in-house, they call it, working direct to just their one focus is fully on their company. And then they're members of several trade associations like what I am and what we've started over at the Digital Energy Council.
Okay.
So they're working at all angles here. They have their team go in, and then they have hired lobbyists, advisors they work with. So they have teams of people working on this stuff. They could be at every, tracking every piece of legislation, tracking everything around town, and frankly, involved in the writing process of pieces of legislation. And that's where you could really get engaged and get involved.
So how does one, trying to keep my head on straight as far as like what I want to ask next. You just at the end there, you mentioned that they even have people with the ability to write is it bills, right? They write a bill, present that.
And we as an association, we most if not all associations try to, you propose language to these policymakers. I have here as well. And that's what we, that's something that we offer here to proactively get pieces of language into these, parts of, big piece of legislation. If you want, I think what you're getting at, kind of how that process works. If you want to go into that,
yeah, please.
yeah. I mean, to oversimplify it, nothing's exactly the same always, but for instance, right now, it's something I've been tracking a little bit, and I think our industry as a whole needs to track a bit longer, is the big energy push on Capitol Hill. So keep in mind, particularly big pieces of energy policy take a long time. Frankly, with the current state of affairs in politics, not a whole lot's going to move anytime soon. But they build out these big energy packages, and right now the big piece is with the Biden infrastructure money that's all going around, the Biden Infrastructure Act, the IRA. There is a lot of money going around. They want to build out these renewable energy projects, but they don't have the transmission to get them anywhere. So the issue with the transmission is it's very covered in red tape, and it's very burdensome to get built anywhere. So this is the red tape of the bureaucracy of the government. So, you get some so you have certain committees up in Congress take it upon themselves to focus on certain issues. Obviously, I mentioned the House Energy and Commerce. They're going to focus on energy. Senate Energy and Natural Resources focus on energy, and so is the Senate EPW, the Environment and Public Works. So they're all going to, in some variations, the chair and the ranking members of these committees, usually the leaders of them, and then you have other members of these committees that get engaged. And ultimately, some of them are just interested in certain topics. Each in the Senate, senators are members of a handful of committees. House, usually it's one or two, just because there's more House members. But within those committees, they have jurisdiction over certain public policies, and the energy committees will take it upon themselves to go write, what they think would be good public policy. And as mentioned, is the transmission is a current topic up on Capitol Hill. It's been a huge fight. To the average person watching the news, this isn't going to be talked about.
It's no, not at all.
They're going to talk about Trump and Biden yelling at each other pretty much.
Yeah.
But so right now they're in the process of negotiating some big packages of legislation, two of which are the Restart Act and the Spur Act. Who knows if they're actually going to go anywhere, but they're in the process of negotiating behind the scenes. And, built into these packages are, in their minds, are kind of horse trading back and forth. I want this in there. This is going to help drive the transmission. This is good for my district. This is how I want to do. There's all this behind the scenes commotion, and they put something together and they bring it to their committee vote. Committee, like I said, is very, very cliff notes, and we can go into more detail of anything if you want, but goes into the committee where they mark it up. They make any, mark up other words.
So maybe just to jump in, Tom, is that, so before it hits the committee, is that where, like, you, for example, would be in providing language and suggestions? And,
precisely.
Hey guys, you need to consider this, and
precisely,
please,
precisely
reconsider that. And
precisely. Think about, these members, the actual members of the senators and the congressmen and women, they don't have enough time in the day to read a 50th of what they're dealing with. And then they have staff who are each tasked with their particular issue area. But if you think staff knows about Bitcoin mining, and it's not a knock on them, it's just how many have time to go read and do this stuff. So they call groups like ours up. So I mentioned earlier all my years spent working on Capitol Hill or Department of Energy. You make relationships with these people, and they know they trust you on, you're going to steer them in the right direction and help them out as they build these pieces out. And so that's when they have a question on this. They call you in, or you proactively go in and say, I think this would fit very well within here, and let's talk about it. And precisely, that's where associations like ours and the lobbyists, et cetera, are a real benefit for industries.
Okay, got it. All right, so
that makes sense. That's kind of a long-winded.
Yeah. So then it gets to the council, and then they have to review in the council.
Yeah, and then kind of that process moves on. It goes to the committee. Ultimately,
committee.
Yeah,
that's right.
Committee. They ultimately gets voted out to the floor, and then the floor is when that's generally defined. They have to pass both the House and the Senate, both chambers, and then it goes to the president's desk. But like I said, very, very condensed down. Schoolhouse rock.
So let's add some like scope and scale to this. How long does it take to get something through that?
Oh, it could be it could be a couple of weeks. It could be a couple of decades. There are bills that have been worked on that have been sitting there for years and years and years that just, if they don't, if it's not politically advantageous for the leaders at that point, or it doesn't have enough support, things like that. There's hundreds, if not thousands, of bills every year that get written. Some just sit there, don't go anywhere. Some are messaging bills. They like to say, we wrote this. And so that's why I said the two bills I mentioned, they might not even go anywhere, but I know they're getting discussed behind the scenes and things like that.
Okay.
But with that said, in the process, groups like the Digital Energy Council and others, you want to be engaged and have a seat at that table while they are negotiating these, while they are drafting them. So a lot of times they'll just say they write it this year. say it doesn't go anywhere in a couple of years, it's a good starting point. So that language is already going to be in there. So you want to be involved, engaged in all those conversations as they happen. And you're asking about the Googles and the Amazons of the world. You better believe they're in they're in every conversation they're having on all fronts of the decision making process.
Oh yeah, I mean without a doubt. Yeah, and I imagine even for them that the energy component, because I'm sure they're not solely focused on their energy consumption of Google. I'm sure Google has many facets that they are concerned with, but I would imagine even energy is starting to hit their world a little bit harder. Again, I'm pretty sure it's public out there that they have a roadmap to like a gigawatt expansion per year, just to keep pace with trends like AI and all the other stuff that they need to stay on top of. So,
that generation piece, I don't know. I've listened to some of your episodes. I don't know if you've talked about it on others, but I don't think it's talked about enough. we have a lot of ideas on all facets of, miners, energy, traditional data centers, you name it. We don't have the generation right now, and I don't think enough people are talking about
yep.
that.
Yeah, no, we just kicked that around.
Yep.
It was really sad to see NewScale. We had this really phenomenal small modular reactor project through a company called NewScale, and they had to fold up. Well, I think they're hanging on by a thread to the project, but I think their budget blew from like 5 to 8 billion. Their power rate jumped substantially because they didn't have enough users to take the electrical units. Is essentially what happened. Yeah, it was really too bad to watch that fall apart. But it's the generation. I honestly haven't even spent enough time talking about it, but it's going to be a problem.
Well, the NewScale brings up a good thought here, and I apologize if I start hijacking this a bit.
Go for it. Yeah.
And how we fit in the in the political world and the regulatory process. It's we want all this generation, but we have all these burdensome regulations to build it out. And to that energy process, process or the regulatory process here of why, why we do what we do is we are here to, explain the positives of our industries. I represent digital energy industry.
Yep.
There's, like I said, there's groups for every energy you can imagine, and explain why we need to cut some of these barriers, and make it more affordable. You know, Nuclear energy is one of the main focuses of the Department of Energy and some of my background. And there's a lot of great ideas in the advanced reactor space, but to build any of these projects, there's not many companies that are going to take it on, and that a lot of that kind of reasoning is in these regulations and having to run through these processes and things like that. So it's trying to get some of these streamlined and get this, figured out.
Yeah. Do you think? I mean, because I think one of the big barriers is just the cost on these projects, and I imagine that there's room to affect that, right? Whether that's freeing up dollars from the IRA or what have you, but I'm sure that there are ways to impact the cost of the project build out, as like just one area that could help, right?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunities. Another, and I hate to be so blunt about this, is it's a lot of money out there in public-private partnerships or grants or all sort of financing mechanisms within the government. The IRA right now, it's a lot of dollars moving around, and
Yeah.
I think it would be our industry's best interest, and it's something I'm trying to work on here, to get more engaged with some of those public-private partnerships. Maybe some aspirations are to direct some funding to the Department of Energy to create a study on mining. To maybe there's an opportunity for the industry to finance some, co-finance them, however they work it out. That's each individual project, but financing opportunities, and I think that's where our industry could really play hand in hand with I already mentioned the energy piece, the policy piece, the government piece, and it's just one more feather in our cap to highlight the tool we are to, advance funding for these projects. Or alternative funding, I should say. Sorry.
Oh, totally. It comes in as such a big economic driver for a nuclear facility. It was really cool, and I'm going to have him on the show pretty soon. I had one of the partners at Scott Madden. Him and I have been kicking around. He wrote an article, and this was like 4 years ago. He wrote an article about the benefits of Bitcoin mining at a nuclear facility and why Bitcoin mining needs to be integrated into a business plan for new nuclear build outs. And it's like, that could be a phenomenal way to start adding generation to the United States that's, carbon free or very close to it and very reliable and large. And then now they're busting into small modular reactor. There's just so many cool things you could do.
And not to pump my own tires here. I've recently been added to board of advisors for a nuclear energy association here in DC called UCAN Power, and they held their first conference here a couple weeks ago. And Max from Standard Power spoke at it with representatives from NuScale, kind of highlighting some opportunities within the industry. So, it's getting out there and engage with the traditional energy world, and at times we get siloed in our own mining or crypto Bitcoin ecosystems as a whole.
Yep.
And getting it out and having, to that, I keep driving home energy. We need to think like energy companies. We are energy companies, and we need to carry the water and tell our stories and get them read up on what we're doing and how we could work with them.
Yeah. Well, we'll have to talk more about that. That's pretty cool to be working directly with the nuclear association like that. So Tom, I wanted to ask you also, is we're kind of talking about bills and things that are hitting, people's desks. Are there particular pieces of legislation right now that you're losing sleep over? Like, are there things out there that you look at and just go, oh my God?
Right now, it's kind of a loaded question right now because of the current landscape of the government.
Okay.
They're having a hard enough issue funding the government at the moment.
Yeah, fair.
And then we're going into a presidential election next year. So there's nothing top of mind, forefront, that is frankly going to fully. And like I said, I'm just thinking of the energy piece because there are some Bitcoin is kind of framed more in the crypto piece that are hanging out there. I don't think they're going to move, but there's Senator Warren and Senator Marshall have a bill that isn't the most promising, but right now it's kind of sitting on the shelf. But right now, the energy piece, I think we're kind of status quo, and it's more so this is an opportunity to engage, to educate, to frankly come to the table with any proposals we have. We had I'm sure you've talked about it in the past, the White House budget this year proposed a 30% DAME tax. It wasn't a bill. If any like-minded members of Congress took it up, they could. But with a Republican-controlled House, we didn't necessarily need to worry about that as much. But it's still a shot across the bow of where some of these like-minded decision makers stand on some of these things. So if that were to ever gain some traction, that would be the one that I would point to. But in terms
as like alarming and concerning.
Yeah, alarming and concerning. I think, frankly, right now there's a lot of opportunities in the energy world, as mentioned with some of the IRA funding. There's a lot of money out there for a lot of projects.
And I wanted to ask you conversely, like what's getting you the most excited right now? You kind of scratched it a little bit, but maybe go a little more on like, what are those opportunities from your standpoint? And like, yeah, maybe go there.
Yeah, no, it's as mentioned, we've been in there engaged with the process with the Spur and Restart Act I mentioned earlier. how we've been engaged on that one for our industry is I think there is an opportunity, and it doesn't necessarily, it could frankly be in a lot of pieces of energy legislation, but I think there's a real opportunity, and I think our industry can get a win if we can get some language in some of these bills that for a non-discriminatory language for the industry. At the end of the day, we're an end user of power. You know, unless you're there's a handful of companies that are working behind the meter or have the generation piece to it, but large majority of miners are buying off utilities. It's just the fact of the matter. And so
Sure.
we're just purchasing bulk power on a free and fair open market. And I think that there's an opportunity there that we could be proactive and put in some non-discriminatory language in some of these as these bills get written or propose it or find some supportive members of Congress who will carry some of that water for us. And I think that is an opportunity for us to pull in other industries into our orbit and why and could be kind of the canary in the coal mine of why industry or energy use in the United States as a whole people should be taking a closer look at, because as we kind of the at the heart of this debate is purchasing power and the government picking winners and losers and deciding who could use this end use electricity.
Yeah.
And I think if they can test it out on us and try to give us any hard doing, other industries could be next. And I think if we can put some non-discriminatory language in there, we can kind of codify that, as long as you're purchasing power on a free and fair and legal open market, government should not be able to discriminate upon end use, period.
Yeah.
So I think there's opportunities like that. I'd like to also work on, maybe getting some. I would love to do a study with one of the national labs from the Department of Energy. So I've been in speaking with members about that. So to say, we could shoot for all this stuff, unless you get some supportive members or willing to kind of put in the political capital for you. You could take it so far, but you need to get the support up there with it. So those are a couple of things that I think are exciting that we could that could be wins for the industry.
Okay. What this may again show my lack of understanding of how everything kind of functions and works in your world, but one thing that comes to mind to me in a lot of the discussions that I have, I'm in Minnesota, I'm dealing with a lot of regulated utilities. Unless you're going to like a municipal, where they have more flexibility in how they operate. But one thing that comes to mind is having the ability to create a new rate case quickly would eliminate a lot of friction, especially up here in the Midwest with regulated utilities, where the quote demand response program is like a time of day rate, where it's not really, what they're doing right now is they're trying to fit Bitcoin mining into this bucket that it doesn't really fit into. It almost does, but not quite. And so there's this like tension and friction where the utility company isn't able to get into an advantageous power rate for a mining company because they're trying to fit you into this weird rate case because it takes 12, 18, 24 months to get a rate case pushed through. I don't know. What do you think about that? I mean, is that something that could be kicked around?
I think it would be kicked around,
to alleviate that
I think it
process.
would be kicked around, but I think that would be, like I said, someone like Eric would definitely know more in depth than myself. I think that would be kind of more the local municipalities, as you mentioned, kind of more local policy, more than the federal piece. With that said, I know it might sound like a broken record, but I think it's also bringing, getting as trying to think through this as these utility or these power providers or whoever it might be, um, that comfort piece to they know what to expect. They trust the industry. They could write these power purchase agreements into a win for both sides. And there have been some not the there have been some stories out there, and several more true about our industry coming in and kind of nefarious actors in the industry maybe not being good stewards of the local power supply or the grid,
Yeah.
or even just pissing off the neighbors. you know
Yep.
it's as simple as that. And I think
Yeah.
showing that we're growing up. I don't know if we're fully there. We're getting there. I think there's some that are fully grown ups now.
We're getting there. We're
But
still on Telegram, Tom.
it,
It's we're trying to get everybody off of fucking Telegram
exactly,
still.
exactly. And it's. I think we're getting there. And it's going to take time.
Yeah.
We are young in this process, and
Yeah.
these utilities, or everyone in this energy ecosystem has been around for decades, if not hundreds of years, and they know what they know. They're slow moving, and
Yeah.
and that's kind of purposeful, so they don't.
Yeah, reliability is the name of their game,
Is
and you don't move fast if you need to supply reliable power. Yeah.
exactly, and so proving our worth to them, and that it makes reliable, helps the reliability, makes financial sense. I think there's still some work to be done there, but we're getting there.
Yeah. Totally agree. All right. So to keep a tab on the time, Tom, it's Friday afternoon. You've been super gracious with your time. You've had a crazy week already. So kind of a wrapping up question that I'd love to have you riff on is if you had a magic wand and you could wave it and get any bill or piece of legislation passed, what would that be?
I think just to be, I come at this stuff with kind of a building piece by piece here, building foundation, and being realistic. And I think right now in the short term would be to get some sort of non-discriminatory language put in to some bills, or even some sort of standalone bill for that. Um, it doesn't necessarily have to say Bitcoin mining on the bill, but back to that conversation I was having earlier, if I could short term something that could be a win for the industry, and really, I think, put ease in some people's mind that we're not going to be able to come at you with the end use of power. Um,
Yeah.
I think having some sort of non-discriminatory language in support of the industry would be. I think it's realistic.
Sure. Do you mind if I push you to maybe share what that non-discriminatory language could look like, or and I'm not even sure
I think it was
what it
just like I
could look
said.
like.
I think it's just a couple lines of something that says, within the power system, the end use, and this isn't exactly how it would come out, but this is kind of how it would come in my mind, because you got to get all the council involved, and
Mm-hmm.
they put it all into the legal language. But it just says something like, if you purchase power on a free and fair and legal open market, keyword legal, um, we cannot discriminate upon the end use of what you're using that power for, electricity, power, whatever it might be, because it goes back to that 30% dame tax, as mentioned, and it was kind of a lot of got a lot of people up in arms, rightfully so, in the industry. Um,
Yep.
the proposal on that was to tax, if you're using electricity for, I think they framed it as crypto mining. We would tax.
Digital asset mining.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
crypto or digital asset. I think it was crypto on that one, but it was, we will tax you 30%, which in effect will get rid of the industry in the United States. So a way to kind of just get out in front of that, and that way no one could come after us, or, like I said, other industries that will be using end use power. You could, I'm sure you can come up with a lot on the top of your head,
Oh yeah.
and I think that could be a win-win-win, all the way around for us. And I think it's generally reasonable, realistic, and something something we could point to for miners, because frankly, there is not a lot of legislation currently being built out with us in the crosshairs or the focus of it.
Yeah.
But that's not to say there won't be in the future. So this will
I
proactively
love
kind of
it.
get out in front of some of that.
Yeah, I love it. I love that approach. Build a foundation that we can start to stand on and build on top of, and that takes the form of like, hey, don't come after us for using electrons.
And then something else that just popped in my mind, I've thought about, and I think it would be a little more of a lift, but you know, we have the opportunity for demand response like none other. Maybe some
Yep.
incentives to, you know, if you come into a certain region, that's the key, is the regions, where there's excess generations, where, you know, we need to go. We need to level set on, as we talked about earlier. We're not transforming overnight. We're a tool in the tool belt in excess generation parts that we can come in and work with that excess generation. In some areas we don't fit. It's just the fact of the matter. And
Yep.
but within those excess generation peaks, you know, it's already kind of written within power purchase agreements, things like that. But having some incentives to that demand response piece, Texas already does it. You know, maybe there's some sort of federal piece to that, or incentivizing the build out of this infrastructure, energy infrastructure tool. But maybe that's a longer term goal. Like I said, I like to start kind of building the foundation of some of this stuff.
Yeah, and I appreciate that because it it makes it more palpable. It's, you know, it's a little bit closer to being realistic, which is awesome. So thank you for that. I really appreciate it. I want to leave a lot of room for you here at the end, Tom. How can the audience get in touch with you? How can they find the work that you're working on? Please point the audience to, you know, wherever you want them to go.
Yeah, no, would love to hear from anyone who is interested or wants to talk or learn more, even if it's basic. You know, what's going on? Say hi. Our handle on Twitter is at Digital Energy US. My personal handle is TomMapes88. And our website is digitalenergycouncil.org. I'm also on LinkedIn. And yeah, no, like I said, feel free, reach out. I think, you know, hopefully this answers some questions to the skeptics out there of why do we need this presence in DC? And it's not something you think about every day, but when that time really comes, when you need it, it's folks like myself. And like I said, there's other people doing great work in our industry out there, but we need to continue building out these support mechanisms throughout the government to ultimately, so they don't, you know, try to take us out like like some proposals out there.
Awesome. Tom, I appreciate that. Thank you for your time today. I really appreciate you taking time on a Friday afternoon amidst the busyness of everything going on. So thank you. Appreciate it. You have a good weekend and you take care.
Same to you, Ben. I appreciate it.